Well, happy Friday, everybody. We're now into May, a little bit of spring here in Ann Arbor. It's grass could not be greener, a lot of rain. Looking forward to some warmer weather this weekend. But we want to welcome you to the Coregonine monthly science webinar, and we're honored today to have Sean Rooney with us. Sean is a senior technician in the research division of IFI, which stands for Inland Fisheries Ireland. Sean's been with IFI since 2003, and he is based in Dublin and their headquarters there. He is currently a part of their European Habitats Directive section, where he is involved in monitoring the conservation of several species, lampreys, shad, and some other rare lake fishes. We'll hear about, of course, some of the Coregonine work and some other species, I think, today. One of his keen areas of interest is in telemetry. Of course, there's an active, as we know, telemetry network here in the Great Lakes with GLaDOS. And during his time with the IFI, Sean has undertaken both radio and acoustic telemetry studies on many different species: pike, bream, eel, salmonids, mullets, shad, and sea lamprey. Really looking forward to this talk. We're expecting it to be 35-40 minutes, and as has been our custom with many of these, we hope that as many of you will stay on as possible and enjoy an informal discussion and interaction. So with that, Sean, I will mute myself, and thanks again for joining us.
Okay.
It's late afternoon.
Yeah. No bother at all. Can you hear me okay there?
Great.
Okay, great. Great. Okay, thanks everybody. So my name is Sean Rooney. I work for Inland Fisheries Ireland, based in Dublin, here in Ireland. Just to give you an idea of our organisation, we are the national state agency here in Ireland in charge of conservation and protection of freshwater fish and their habitats. We also promote angling. We've got between 300 and 400 people working with us at the moment. A lot of those people would be boots on ground, fisheries protection staff. We have a number of regional offices where these people are based. We would have a sizable administrative section as well. We also have a very small research section, about 40 people or so in it. I'm part of that. So, and some just an aside that some marine species also come under our remit. So that's a little bit about my organization. I suppose we would be similar enough to the US fish and game, fish and wildlife, with maybe some functions from the EPA and maybe also from the biology division of the US Geological Survey. Okay, so I'll move on to my first slide. I just want to give some geographic context to the talk, and I just show you some scale, show exactly where we are. So here we are here in Ireland, and we're an island off another island, the United Kingdom, off of the mainland Europe. So by that rationale, you would expect that because we're an island, that we would have fewer species compared to mainland Europe, and that is certainly the case. United Kingdom has fewer bird, insects, fish, small mammal species in comparison to mainland Europe, and then Ireland, in comparison to the UK, has even fewer, and it all has to do with our position and the last ice age, 12,000 years ago, when that finished. But just to give you a sense of scale, this is where you guys are, and I've superimposed Ireland at the same scale beside the Great Lakes. So you can see that Ireland could pretty much fit into some of your Great Lakes. And I've been a little bit mischievous here when I talk about Ireland's Great Lakes. So they're in the great scheme of things, there's a couple of orders of magnitude between the size of our lakes and the size of some of your lakes. Our largest lakes would fit into some of your small bays. So So it's a bit mischievous for me to call them Great Lakes, but we think they're great anyway, and that's all that really matters. So looking closer at the island of Ireland, you can see some of these Great Lakes that I was talking about. Here you've got Lough Neagh in Northern Ireland. Outside, I should have mentioned we've got two jurisdictions on the island of Ireland. You're probably well aware of that anyway. We have the Republic of Ireland here in the south, and in the northeast corner we've got Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. So I'll say a little bit more about that later on. But I had mentioned some of the Great Lakes. You can see some of them here as well. Lough Erne. It doesn't show up very well here, but one of our biggest rivers is the River Shannon, and three of the Great Lakes sit on the River Shannon. Now it's the longest river in Ireland and in the British Isles. It comes in at a whopping 360 kilometers, which is 230 miles. Might not seem very long to you, but it's pretty long for an island like this. So you can. The Shannon rises here in the Midlands. And the first lake, we've got Lough Allen, flows out of Lough Allen in a southward direction. Next lake is Lough Ree, flows out of that again southward direction into the largest of the three lakes, which is Lough Turg. And then it flows on down and enters the sea at Limerick here. So if anybody's ever flown into Shannon Airport will be around here. And we're currently over here on the east coast in Dublin. So the River Shannon catchment is quite a large catchment. It drains about a fifth of the entire island. So the focus is going to be mainly on pollen, which is the name we have for our only native Coregonine species. But I know it would be remiss of me not to mention some of our other unique rare species, such as Arctic Char and the Killarney Shad. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the distributions and the ecology and the threats that they experience. I'll talk a little bit about the survey methods, and then a little bit about the legislation and protection that we have here in Ireland and Europe to protect these species. So as I mentioned, a lot of it has to do with the last ice age. When the ice started to almost the entire island of Ireland would have been under a massive ice dome. I think Kimo from Finland a couple of months ago at his talk, he mentioned the last glaciation. So as the ice retreated, some species were able to colonize quite naturally. So these would have been salmonids and eels, and some other anadromous species such as shad. So then, as humans started coming onto the island, colonizing in various waves, they brought various species. A lot of our mammal fauna is directly due to purposeful introductions by Vikings, by early Christian monks, and by other various ways of colonizers for various reasons. So these people would have brought pike, would have brought other fish species, coarse fish species, cyprinids, as food source mainly. Then in the mid 18th century, you started getting some species been translocated, been moved around for angling purposes and for ornamental purposes. Then in the middle of the last century, from the 1950s onwards, with economic development and so on, intensive farming, we got quite a lot of nutrient enrichment, also a lot of hydropower schemes and drainage. So catchments and lakes and rivers and so on were directly started to really feel the anthropogenic impact. And now we've got climate change and alien invasive species as well on the whole lot. So quite a lot of our native species who were already under a bit of pressure because they're at the limits of their geographic range, they're really feeling pressure. And so I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So the three fish species that I want to talk about, the pollen, Arctic Char, and the Clarini Shad, these all dwell in open water habitats. they're completely native to Ireland. They're an important part of our natural heritage. And as I mentioned, they were likely to be amongst the first vertebrates to colonize the country after the Ice Age, on these various super rivers and proto rivers that were flowing off the ice, melting ice before the catchments as we know them became fully formed. So two of the species, the Coregonine, the pollen, and the Arctic char, they're cold water salmonids, while the pollen and the Arctic char are cold water salmonids, and the Killarney Shad is actually a member of the herring family. It's a clupid, so it would have originally been an anadromous species that would have spent most of its time at sea, but would have returned to freshwater habitats for a month or so every year to spawn. And all three species are at the thermal edge of their range in Ireland, as I mentioned. Both pollen and Arctic char will be affected by rising temperatures, whereas the Killarney Shad will actually like warm temperatures. If it gets any colder, they will find it a bit of a struggle to survive. And all three fish, both the pollen and the Arctic char, were quite abundant and widespread in lakes all around the country, but they're now in decline and locally extinct. The Clarini Shad is restricted to one single lake system in the south of the country, as the name suggests, in Killarney and County Kerry. So this is a map of where we currently find the Arctic char, the pollen, and the Killarney Shad, and you can see there's quite a lot of open dots there that show where the Arctic char has gone extinct, and now they really are restricted to northwestern and western and a few lakes in the southwest as well on the extremities. They're gone from all of the major lakes. Pollen are found in three of our lakes here in the Republic of Ireland, and in 2 lakes across the border in Northern Ireland. And the Killarney Shad is the it's the red dot down here in Killarney. We've got 12,000 lakes in total. A lot of those lakes will be quite tiny, and they're only found in a handful of those lakes. Arctic char and pollen. So as I mentioned, both the pollen and the Killarney Shad, they're endemic and they're considered vulnerable to extinction. And the Arctic char has really suffered quite badly, particularly over the past couple of decades, and they're now locally extinct in many places where they were previously found. So as I said, I'm going to focus on the pollen. This lake whitefish, it's closely related to the Arctic Cisco, which you guys would all be aware of. And the similar variants found in lots of parts of Europe. Similar species in the Highlands of Scotland, in the English Lake districts, in Wales, and in other parts of mainland Europe, in the French and the Swiss Alps. And all confined to just a small number of lakes, and they don't migrate out of those lakes. There's no seaward migrations at all. They're in most cases they're completely landlocked. So here is the geographic range of the Arctic Cisco. You can see it's a circumpolar species, and you can see how far outside the range we are down here. I'd mentioned before that we have 2 jurisdictions here on the island of Ireland. So that means that we've 2 different sets of monitoring organisations. So there's 2 lakes in Northern Ireland, Lough Neagh and Lower Lough Erne, where the pollen are still in existence, and they are monitored by 2 organisations, the Lochs Agency and AFBI. And here in the Republic of Ireland, south of the border, we have just in 3 species that I mentioned, Loch Allen, or in the 3 lakes, Loch Allen, Loch Ree, and Loch Derg. And it comes down to us here in Inland Fisheries Ireland to monitor their stocks and their status. So on these 3 lakes, we will conduct regular netting surveys, and the usual questions come up. Where are they? How many are there? What can we learn about their biology? Where do they spawn? These are all the questions that preoccupy us. So we've done quite a lot of work with hydroacoustics. We would have done hydroacoustic transects of all of the 3 lakes. And one thing that we noticed is that the pollen density decreases as you descend the Shannon. So the uppermost lake, Loch Allen, which is very, very close to the source, it's a small lake. It's only 7 miles long. The water, it would have relatively good water quality. The next lake down is Loch Ree. That lake is 18 miles long from top to bottom. And then the next lake down, Loch Derg, is the largest of the 3. That's 24 miles long from top to bottom. And in this map here, we're only really looking at the southern end of the lake. There's nearly as much above this again. I'll show you that on a map later on. So as you descend through the Shannon, you start to see more anthropogenic effects on water quality, more eutrophication, more invasive species, more coarse fish species, more cyprinids and so on, and in invasive species such as we have Asian clown and we have zebra mussels here. So they're all having impacts on water quality and the biodiversity in these lakes, on food webs and so on. So the lowest densities are recorded in the lowermost lake in Loch Derg, which also happens to be the largest of the lakes. So it's quite possible that there's habitat issues going on there as well. So one of the primary ways that we will survey for pollen is using pelagic netting surveys. We follow a very strict protocol. It's an EU protocol, and it's based on the bathymetry of the lake. So the lake is broken up into various depth bands, and the relative contribution of each depth band, the overall volume of the lake is worked out, and then nets are assigned then via formula to the various depth bands, and they're assigned at random locations within each depth band. So here on the left we have a map of Loch Derg. I mentioned that there was half again was left out on the previous map. So here it is. Here's the upper half of the lake. Here's the lower half of the lake, and you can see this is the bathymetry of the lake here. It can get quite deep in places over 20 meters, but they're restricted mainly to the lower half of the lake, and that's where we would encounter most of the pollen for most of the year. Then you can see over here, this is where the nets will be assigned at random to the various depth bands. So this is where we would deploy the nets. We will also use these plankton nets. We also call them bongo nets. The twin nets, we'll hang them off the front of the boat, and we'll do transects of the lake to look for juvenile pollen. We've done that a couple of times. We've done it on Loch Ree and on Loch Allen, and we would do it during April, and we were always fairly confident when we found larvae in the planktonic larvae that they were pollen, because they're the only planktonic larvae that you would expect at that time of the year. So when we carried out our survey here on Loch Ree, you can see that we've got the locations where we found them are in green, and the locations where we didn't get them are in red. You can see they're kind of clustered along the west coast of the lake, what happens, there's a very slow flow from north to south through the lake, water flow. And then you also have, in the couple of weeks leading up to the survey, we had strong easterly winds. So a lot of the larvae would have got blown across the lake and would get clustered here on the west side of the lake. And here we go again. This is the uppermost lake, Loch Allen, where we undertook this bongo netting in April of 2014. And again, you can see the positive locations are a lot more widespread around the lake. Not as clustered. Smaller lake as well, much smaller lake. We're interested in finding out where they spawn. That's really the holy grail. We've no real idea where they spawn. We've got a bit of anecdotal evidence, but we really would like to be able to put our fingers on exact locations. So what we've done in the past is during the summertime, when water levels are quite low, we've gone around the perimeter of the lakes and various islands looking for suitable habitat. This kind of shingly gravel shoals and so on. And we mark likely locations, and then we return to them during the winter time when we would expect the pollen to be spawning, when the water temperatures drop to about 4 or 5 degrees, and we set nets in these areas hoping to catch some pollen on their way to spawn. But as of yet, we have to catch them, we have to intercept them. It just hasn't happened. One of the things we notice is, we mentioned that the density of pollen decreases as you move from north to south through the Shannon system. What we also notice is that the size of the fish increases overall. So when we look at the length frequency graphs, if we compare Loch Allen with Loch Ree, we can see that Loch Allen here in the red, the fish are much smaller, whereas Loch Ree can be dominated by much larger individuals. And you can see the difference here. This is some Loch Allen fish on a 30-inch measuring board, and here's a same sample from Loch Ree. You can see they're quite larger. And these fish now, if we could get our hands on live fish of this size, they would be perfect for acoustic telemetry, and it's something I would dearly love to do. I'd love to tag a bunch of fish on Loch Ree and see where they go throughout the year, and hopefully find where they spawn. So just some facts that we've learned so far about pollen in the Shannon system. They can grow up to 35 centimeters, and they've been aged to 6 years or so. The odd one might be 6+. We've still to find where they spawn. In Loch Ness in Northern Ireland, it's a very, very shallow lake, and they've been found spawning over coarse gravel in winter when the temperatures get down to 4 degrees, just under 5 degrees, December, January. So that's what's leading us in our searches, where we think they spawn in the same type of habitat, but where? There's also some evidence that some populations might leave their respective lakes to spawn, that they might swim upriver, or they might swim downriver to find suitable spawning locations in the riverine sections of the Shannon system. The juveniles will feed on zooplankton, and as such, their populations can be prone to boom and bust. I'd already mentioned that the pollen Loch Allen are much smaller than those in Lochs Ree and Derg, and we put that down to possibly poorer feeding and higher pollen density causing competition for food. Although there may be other factors also that we need to investigate. So, but overall, they seem to be we repeat the surveys every couple of years. They appear to be stable enough, but we're conscious that they might never be too far from a tipping point. We mentioned that the abundance decreases as we descend down the Shannon system. Lots of anthropogenic impacts, increased, I mentioned that already, that there's more complex fish communities, invasive species, and higher trophic status as well. And some of our survey techniques, the pelagic netting and the hydroacoustics, these directly inform European management and conservation planning. So the results of our surveys will directly feed into overall reporting to the EU. I'll mention a little bit about Arctic char. Some of you will be familiar with Arctic char in Canada, North America. We have them here as well. You can see the again circumpolar distribution, and we really are on the edge of their geographic range here. And you've seen this map already, where with lots of dots where char had been, and they've gone extinct. They really are confined to a very small number of very small lakes around the fringes of Ireland, and these lakes would be quite prone to disturbance. And it doesn't take very much when species such as perch and so on get into these lakes and upset the balance. It's not very long until the char will disappear. One of the nice things about the Arctic char surveys is that we get to visit very, very scenic parts of the country. So if any of you ever get the chance to travel around Ireland, I would urge you to, get out of Dublin as quickly as possible and head for the west, head for Connemara, or head for Donegal, or head for parts of Kerry. And the Guinness tastes nicer the further west you go as well. Just a few little factoids about the Arctic char. They're the world's most northerly distributed freshwater fish. Within the Arctic Circle, they demonstrate anadromy, where they will actually swim out to sea and spend time at sea. They can feed and grow at ultra low temperatures. In Ireland, they're only found in lakes. Some lakes, they can grow to quite a large size, 35 centimeters or so, and they've been quite long-lived, aged at 9 years plus. They spawn over coarse gravel. That's a misspelling. Sorry about that. It's actually coarse gravel. Juveniles will feed on zooplankton and benthic invertebrates. And as I mentioned, they're very, very sensitive to nutrient enrichment, climate warming, non-native acidification, and sedimentation of spawning gravels as well, disturbance of the spawning gravels. So a lot of their populations are struggling, and very, very close to tipping point. And as I mentioned, it wouldn't take very much to cause them to go extinct in any particular lake. Last species I want to talk about is very, very unique. It's the Killarney Shad. It's found in only one single lake system in the south of the country, in Killarney. Just checking how I'm doing for time. Okay, that's fine. And they are actually they're a landlocked version of a marine species, a diadromous species called the Thwaite shad, which still comes into some Irish rivers to spawn around about this time of the year. And you would have them as well down along the east coast of the United States, various types of shad. They're a member of the herring family, but after the last ice age, a population of them became landlocked in this lake system, and they've been there ever since. So this is what they look like. Quite a small fish, bony fish. But one of the things we noticed that they're one of the few fish species that can actually hear and respond to noise. And we think it's problematic when you're trying to approach them with hydroacoustic sonar. They can actually hear some of the frequencies that have been emitted by the hydroacoustic sonar, and they will actually avoid. They'll get out of the area, and it's an adaptation. We think it's an adaptation to avoid echolocating predators such as cetaceans, when they were back in their marine days. So that's interesting. Okay, so I mentioned they're a landlocked Thwaite shad, and similar species occur in some of the Great Lakes in the north of Italy and also in the Balkans. They can grow up to 35 centimeters, but in general they would be 20-25 centimeters would be the most the frequent age or length class that we would encounter. Again, it's suggested that they spawn over shallow gravel around the edges of the lake and on some of the islands. This is what happens to the species in the north of Italy. During May and June, they come into the shores of the lake and spawn, form spawning aggregations around in shallow areas, and people will actually go fishing for them. Apparently, if you shallow fry them in batter, they taste quite nice. Yeah, I mentioned that they form large shoals in the open water as well in the pelagic zone. They feed on zooplankton, and the lakes in Killarney are just rammed with zooplankton. They don't appear sensitive to nutrient enrichment, which is quite important because this particular lake has a very, very high trophic status mainly due to the town of Killarney and the amount of tourists that go through the town. That has a direct impact on the water quality in the lake. So, as we mentioned, nutrient enrichment and climate warming may not be as big a problem for this species, as they're a warm water species anyway. So, a lot of our monitoring directly feeds is due to European legislation. We're obliged under two different directives, EU-wide directives, to monitor these species. We have the Water Framework Directive, which looks to protect water quality in rivers and lakes, and the onus there is to monitor these water bodies and arrive at a health score for the water body, and then you're obliged not to let this score deteriorate. If it's a low score, you're obliged to do whatever you can to improve conditions. And if the lake or water body has quite a high score, you're obliged to maintain that high score. The Habitats Directive then is another EU-wide directive aimed at protecting and conserving species and habitats. So again, unfortunately, here in Ireland, we've various bylaws and so on that protect certain species, but these rare lake fish aren't protected under any national legislation. So we rely upon this EU legislation to afford them protection, and it's one of the benefits of being part of a economic and social federation of states, that we can come up with these all-encompassing directives that will protect some of these rare species and habitats. The three species, two of them, the pollen and the Clarini Shad, are mentioned in the European Habitats Directive. The Arctic Char is mentioned in an IUCN derivative, the Red Data Book. So here's the entire list of freshwater species here in Ireland that we are obliged to monitor and comment on. EU member states were obliged to report on the status of the listed species and habitats every 6 years. So all of the survey work we do feeds into individual reports that we will submit, and then we're able to ascertain their status, trends in population, whether their distribution is increasing or decreasing, and so on. So I'm getting near the end of the talk. What I need to say a few words about this lady here, Emma Morrissey. She's moved on to bigger and better things, but she was quite an active part of the research section here. She was an expert on hydroacoustics, and quite a lot of the work on these three species was driven by this lady here. So we're indebted to her. And she actually wrote up her PhD part-time on the work that she did here in IFI. Produced some excellent papers, one particular award-winning paper there. So I just, if you're interested, I'd strongly advise you to check her out on ResearchGate, Emma Morrissey. So the last slide here is my colleagues here in the Habitats Directive section, and the lady in the bottom left is Nicola, and she would be the main driver behind the lake work here. We're just her helpers, really. She's the expert. She should be giving this talk, not me. So that's pretty much it. If you're interested in some of the work we do, our website is there, fisheriesireland.ie. You can access our various publications if you follow that link. And we're also on Twitter, the research section, and Inland Fisheries itself. There's two different Twitter streams going on. So if you take a look if you feel like it. And that's it. How am I doing for time? Okay, good.
Great. You did great. Yeah. Thanks so much, Sean. Really interesting talk. It's, as a lover myself of Ireland, it was nice to get to see some of the beautiful images there, learn more about the fish that I didn't really know anything about, and especially these rare species, including pollen and Coregonine. Maybe for my question, do you mind flipping back to that sort of status of slide you had, maybe 3 or 4 back? I'm interested, and so for everybody, maybe one more. There you go, that one.
Okay.
But for those of you that are thinking of your questions, if you can just raise your hand in the participant bar. I think it's, let's see, it's under reactions under my Zoom. You can raise your hand. You can also just flip your camera on if you're able. That would be great too, just to make it a more friendly sort of environment. But I'll kick off the question just with regard to this slide, Sean.
Sure. And
so I'm used to the language with Endangered Species Act, or the Canada has the SARA, or the COSEWIC process. So it looks like none of these species are actually endangered. They're sort of close to being endangered, or is the language such that it's just different? And
it would be similar enough. We have a couple of there's another, if you were to think about it in traffic light terminology: green light, amber light, and then red light. Green light, good; amber light, a little bit dodgy; red light, definitely problematic here. There's another category that there would be 3 more categories above this again, where they will be endangered, under threat, and liable to go extinct. So, but as I say, with some of these species now, a lot of these, we sit down every couple of years and revisit the status, and are we, it can be quite subjective at times.
Sure, based on the monitoring and looking at the trends.
Yeah.
So for the ones, like the Arctic char, that seems like it's had the biggest loss of distribution. I mean, are there plans? Are there resources, or is there interest to try to reintroduce those back into lakes where they were formerly extant, or is that just not on the table in the shorter near term?
It has been mooted. It has been mooted. I think the best thing we can do for the moment is to conserve the lakes that they're in, to do our best for the lakes that they're in, to make sure they don't go extinct in any more lakes, and to limit accidental introductions of other fish and invasive species into those lakes, and also to manage any kind of effluent flow in, or the impacts of farming around the lakes, or urbanization around those lakes. So I think that's probably the most important thing, is to hold the decline, and then maybe think about trying to reintroduce them. I know these, in other parts of the world, these Arctic char are farmed, so the technology is there to to strip them and raise, keep brood stock and raise juveniles, and so there is potential there to it would mean we would have to probably refit some of our fish farms and so on for for colder water conditions. But yeah, I wouldn't yeah, it's been mooted. I wouldn't rule it out. But as I say, I prefer to see the decline halt before we would think about reintroducing them.
Makes sense. Okay, we have now 3 up with their hands. I saw Ben Rook's hand up first. Ben, you want to go ahead?
Hi there. I may have missed it, but have there been any studies looking at some of the drivers for the size differences in the Cisco populations in the chain of lakes? What's kind of the current thinking for those differences right now?
The size differences?
Yes.
Yes, it's I think it's due to higher density and competition for food it's the differences are most marked between the uppermost lake at the very top of the system, which would have the best water quality and the least amount of anthropogenic impacts. And it's a much smaller lake as well. It's I mentioned it's 7 miles long in comparison with 18 and 24 miles long for the other 2 lakes. So it would be we think it's competition for food and space, really. That's the high density and competition for food that's keeping them small.
Okay. Are there any genetic differences between those populations, or are they all kind of intermixing that way?
I'm not sure if people have compared the lakes to each other. I know there have been studies where these populations have been compared with other European populations. I would imagine there's little or no genetic divergence between the 3 populations.
All right, thanks. That's all I had.
Okay.
Thanks, Ben. Lars, saw your hand next.
Okay, hi. Nice to hear about Ireland and this fish.
Thank you.
I got so fascinated by this Killarney Shad.
Yes.
This is not. I know this is a Coregonine group, but the shad, you have 3 shads on this slide. Alice and Thwaite, are they anadromous?
They are, yeah, they are anadromous, and of those 2 species, we have 4 rivers in the south of Ireland that are special areas of conservation for Thwaite shad, and we get fairly good annual runs, spawning migration runs in 3 of those.
Okay.
Alice shad were kind of at the edge of their geographic range here. They will be more associated with rivers on mainland Europe, French rivers, Spanish rivers, Portuguese rivers. There is evidence that some of our rivers had runs of Alice shad as well in the past. There's hybridization between both species. When you study the genetics of Thwaite shad, you quite often find that there's an element of Alice shad in there as well. That there's quite a lot of at some stage in their past there was a hybridization.
Right.
And
they're Alosa.
They're both yeah. They're both
right.
Yeah.
So just another follow question about the acoustics. How did you figure out that they were avoiding it?
We know that the anadromous species of Thwaite shad, if you use one of these Didson acoustic surveying units to try and do a count of the shad as they pass through a water body, they will actually disperse once they come close to the acoustic noise cone. They will actually avoid it or try and go circumvent it. And it was seen when they were undertaking the hydroacoustics on the Killarney lakes, that when they did see shoals of fish, that they seemed to react to the hydroacoustic sonar as it was getting close to them.
Okay, so it's observations of behavior. Observations.
Yeah.
We need to look at that here with our alewife surveys in Great Lakes.
Yes.
That's why I was interested. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Lars. Andy Cook.
Great presentation, Sean. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I read a paper sometime back about pollen in Loch Ness, and
Yes.
they seem to have a fairly high incidence of heart cyst, a diegene parasite, the Metasicaria. And I just wondered if this parasite in the form of heart cyst is abundant in the Shannon River lakes, and if so, is there any thought as to the potential impact on those populations, or is it just another parasite present?
As far as I know, nobody has ever actually looked into characterizing the parasite burden of pollen here in the Republic of Ireland. Now, it will be something in the routine dissections that people would undertake here in the organization. They would note, that if they came across parasites, but they wouldn't. That's really as far as it would go. And I can check it out for you if you like. I can see. I mean, there are some of the university departments here in Ireland have parasitologists working in them. I can see if there's been a study done. But no, I can't answer your question. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. We have this parasite in Lake Erie whitefish, and it tends to be more prevalent in adults. And I think the intermediate host is a snail, and in Ireland, the final host is a genus of gulls.
Okay.
So I imagine it's probably similar in some respect in Lake Erie. But on some occasions, the hearts are entirely covered by cysts, so that the hearts are white.
Okay.
With the coverage. So I just wondered, it's conceivable that there could be some impact at the population level, but we really don't know in Lake Erie if that's the case. And there's been mention that asymmetry of gonads occur in Loch Ness pollen and that sort of thing. But as it stands, we just don't know what the impact is in Lake Erie whitefish.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't answer your question.
Oh, that's okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Good question, Andy. I learned some things there too. I did not know that about the Lake Erie whitefish issue. And a nice potential connection there to the pollen in Ireland. So while we see if we have any more questions, Sean, I saw you talked about many of the juvenile pollen tend to eat zooplankton, but then some of those pictures you showed and you indicated they could be up to 35 centimeters. Do you ever see evidence of them eating more minnows, small fish, or are they getting to that size all based on plankton, to your all's knowledge?
Yeah, you'd imagine they might have to be eating some invertebrates as well. Well, I'm rarely involved in the dissections of the fish. Off the top again, I know that plankton and invertebrates make up the bulk of the stomach contents. But I would imagine they're a salmonid after all, so you would expect that there would be some amount of preying upon smaller fish species as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We see some of that in our Great Lakes, the most common Cisco species, but it's in some places it's rare, in some places it's going more common. So just thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
Lars, did you have another question?
Yeah, can I ask another question?
Yeah,
sure.
Nobody else is.
So I wonder, you have all these cold water species, Arctic char in particular, but also the coregonids, and climate change is occurring. Is there a movement, or do you discuss in Ireland that just give up on these cold water species?
No, that's never entered the conversation. I think we're still hopeful that we can conserve. Now it may, you know, who's to know 20, 30 years down the line. I mentioned, you know, they're already, you know, they're struggling. They're at the edge of their range. They're probably very close to tipping point, if not on tipping point already, and it doesn't take much to cause them to go locally extinct. You know, it could get to a stage where climate change does get a little bit out of control over the next 50, 100 years, and there's just nothing we can do about losing this fish.
Okay, but you're not triaging kind of which ones you should try and put more effort on, and which ones you just give up on.
No. We don't have that many species in the first place. We only have a handful of species really. So it will be, you know, it might be different if we had more species, a richer biota. But no, we've only got a handful of these species.
All right. So since you don't have a very rich biota and the climate is changing, are you thinking of introducing some more warm water species?
No, definitely not. No, we wouldn't.
Okay.
No, we're happy. We're happy with what we've got. We're happy with what we've got.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Great. Ben.
Sorry, I was on mute. Good talk. I was wondering if are there recreational or commercial fisheries for these fish, like the pollen? I imagine there's probably a recreational fishery for Arctic char. But what about pollen? And if there isn't, do the residents do they know what pollen is? You know, because I feel like for some species in the Great Lakes, you know, not many people know about Cisco except for those people where there's actually a fishery for it. So, but you know, do people fish for these species?
Here in the Republic, no, there's no active fishing for these species. There's no commercial fishing, and there's no recreational fishing for the species. And if you were to, you know, your average person on the street, if you stop them and said, you know, do you know what a pollen is? They kind of look at you as if you had two heads. They go, so no, they're not. They wouldn't be a well-known species at all. There is an exception over the border in Northern Ireland, in Lough Neagh. There is a small commercial fishery there for pollen. There's some funny things going on in that lake. It's a very shallow lake, high trophic status, and you would imagine that the pollen just wouldn't like it at all, that it wouldn't be suitable for whitefish, they go extinct. But quite the opposite. For whatever reason, there's quite decent populations, sustaining populations, and there's a small commercial fishery for them. So local people in Northern Ireland or around the lake would be familiar with pollen, and would eat it with some regularity.
Sorry, do you guys do a lot of outreach and stuff to kind of promote what you're trying to do?
We do. Yeah. We have we try and publicize these rare species on our website, and we have outreach to schools and other organizations. We try and publicize these rare fish, just to try and boost knowledge.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Ben. Any final questions before we let Sean go on a 6:30 on a Friday, where maybe he's gonna go find one of those bad tasting Guinness in Dublin.
Maybe later. Maybe later. Maybe later. I've a few other things to do. Just you might notice there on the slide that sea lamprey is we have that at the top. I was just mentioning to Nick before we started the webinar that you know, here in Ireland and Europe, we actually like our sea lamprey, and we're doing our best to try and conserve them and protect them. It's a different scenario from what's happening in the Great Lakes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I remember a story for the Queen's in the UK for one of her something centennials, one of her celebrations that they actually, Nick, am I getting this right? We actually sent some sea lamprey from the Great Lakes in order for like some sort of pie to be made, some ceremonial pie.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's one of Mark's stories. I guess it's pretty interesting to mail a invasive species internationally. But I don't think the pie was actually eaten. I wouldn't want to eat a Great Lakes sea lamprey.
No, it's not. And you know that goes back to that has its origins in medieval history. One of the kings of England died from gorging himself on a pie made from sea lampreys. So yeah, he got poisoning or whatever from it. But you still, you know, if you go to mainland Europe, there's commercial fisheries for sea lamprey, and you will see, you know, if you're passing a fishmonger's around this time of the year, you will see a sign up in the window. They'll say, you know, hi lamprey, we have lamprey today, yippee, come in and get your lamprey. And they're not the most appetizing looking. I've seen photographs of them on dishes and so on, and no, I wouldn't be. No, I like them. I prefer them alive. I prefer them alive and swimming.
Well, I just made sea lamprey à la Baudelaise for my fish class, and they loved it. It was very good.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'll.
How do you prepare that, Lars?
Oh, you make a wine reduction sauce, lots of butter, nice wine, onions, garlic, and then you clean the lamprey and you fry them in a little bit of flour, and then it thickens up the sauce, and it tasted really good. They took seconds and thirds.
Oh wow! Okay.
You should try it, Sean.
Okay. I'll let you know how I get on. So I'll let you know they're starting to come into the rivers here now to spawn. So yeah, maybe I'll grab a few after they've spawned, and I'll let you know what I think.
All right.
All right. Well, Sean, I wish you the best of luck. Hopefully you can get some telemetry studies going on there for pollen to figure out where they're spawning. That would be really interesting to know if they're spawning where you think. You can get the resources to pull that off.
Sure. Yeah. I think it would. That's how I first got in contact with Nick. It was in August last year. I saw on Twitter that there was going to be a Coregonine handling and tagging workshop. So I emailed Nick to see if I could sit in it, and I'm still here. So, and I got some excellent tips from it. There was some great presentations. It's just, you know, I'd love to go out and translate that into you know, proper fish, you know, that I could, you know, get access to and tag safely. Because, you know, bringing them, catching them is going to be finding where they are and catching them when they're in shallow water, so you don't damage them, hauling them up from depths. That's the key. That's the key. And we don't have any type of commercial fisheries or fish farms where we can get our hands on fish similar to what Richard Krause did when he was tagging his fish. So we're relying on capturing wild fish and making sure that we don't damage them too much in the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think when people first started thinking about tagging Cisco's 5 or 6 years ago, there was a lot of pessimism about their
Yeah.
fragility, and they've proven to be
Hard
they've-
enough.
Yeah, it's worked. It's worked to everyone's
Yeah.
surprise. I mean, with a lot of hard work, on people's
Yeah.
behalf. But yeah, we certainly can. Anything we can do to further transfer that information, Nick would be a really good contact for that. Put you in
Great.
contact with.
Right. Thank you.
All right, I did get confirmation, Nick, that Weidel is a go for June the 3rd. So I don't know if you wanted to. We've lost maybe 10% of our audience here in the last 10 or so minutes, but we can maybe still drop it in the chat if people want to register now. That'll be a great talk on spawning habitat actually for Cisco and whitefish, and some of Bryant's methods using egg traps and larval emergence and looking at different habitat types. Some work done there at Cornell too with Lars. So that should be a great talk next month. So hopefully we'll get another great turnout for that. But Sean, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Pleasure.
Everybody have a great month, and we'll see you in June, hopefully.